Last year, the country lost $500 million. Now, I'm sure we've all lost the odd coin down the back of the sofa, but $500 million seems like it's a bit excessive. It's enough to run the annual budget of all 3 campuses of Massey University. It's enough to pay for 20,000 hip replacements, which is what we plan to do over the next 3 years. It's enough to pay the pension for 35,000 retired people, which is more than twice the number who are currently living in Tauranga. So why are we suddenly $500 million poorer? Well, last year, the New Zealand kiwi fruit industry got sick. Now, you might recall kiwi fruit, both the gold and the green varieties, are clones. So we have thousands of hectares of countryside planted out in what are effectively identical twins. Last year, a bacterial disease known as PSA got into the country. Then when one of those plants got sick, they all got sick. All of a sudden, we are $500 million poorer. I'm not going to talk to you tonight about the science behind that outbreak, although it's really fascinating. Instead, I think what is perhaps more interesting is about how the public engage with the outbreak. Our newspapers are not exactly replete with scientific articles, but for a brief while they were. And people were talking about everything with very weighty topics, such as border security, all the way through to sort of less weighty topics, such as what people were going to put on the Christmas pavlova. Sir Paul Callaghan, I think, would have hated the outbreak. I think he genuinely would have been very upset about the damage it has done to families and to communities throughout the country. But he would have absolutely loved the debate. And that, of course, is what this event is all about. The Rotary Club and the sponsors have given us this wonderful opportunity to hear from 12 young emerging scientists. And tomorrow they're going to be telling us what they think the big challenges are that are facing our country. Hopefully, they're also going to tell us how they think that evidence-based research can fix some of those problems. When I was asked to speak today, I gladly accepted, but I asked, well, why do you want me to speak? And I was told that the government considers me to be a young researcher. Well, I'm gratified. I'm sure that's highly amusing to the high school students in the audience. But there is an element of truth to this, because in the area that I work in, which is computational biology, it takes a very long time to get to the point where you can actually work sort of with the big boys. And it's only within the last few years that I've actually been a functional independent research scientist. As I've thought back of that process, I was trying to think, well, what do I wish I had known before I started this process? And although I'm far too young to be giving advice, I think there are 3 bits of information that I would like to tell the finalists. First, don't be afraid of failure. Well, obviously not tomorrow. I'm sure your talks will go just fine. But in general, failure is the essence of science. When you're doing science, you're doing something that nobody has ever done before. You can't just go to Wikipedia and look up the answer. And every time you try and do something new, chances are it's not going to work out. But perhaps one time in 100, it will work right. And then you will see something that nobody has ever seen in the history of the world, and that's a fairly special moment. My second bit of advice would be learn a diverse range of skills. So we have thousands of students in this country who are learning law, biology, chemistry, journalism. To be perfectly honest, we don't really need them. All of the really interesting problems in the world today fall at the gaps between traditional subjects. So what we need are lawyers who understand a bit of biology. We need biologists who know a bit of chemistry. We need chemists who understand journalism, just like Sir Paul. Now, I'm not saying that you should be a jack of all trades, and it's important that you specialize, you learn something very, very well. But perhaps what is more important is that you can speak across the aisle, that you can talk to people with a diverse range of backgrounds, that you can work in multidisciplinary teams. We need diverse groups that can tackle the big problems that are facing this country, and those are problems that cannot be solved by one individual alone. Essentially, what you're going to need is a diverse set of skills, and you don't need to be hamstrung by 19th century definitions of subjects. My final piece of advice: be nice to your parents. Do you remember those times when you came home talking about graphite structures, fullerene, carbon nanotubes? Honestly, they were thinking, if you're so interested in tubing, couldn't you just become a plumber? If you look at the Herald on Sunday, you will see there are lots of jobs for plumbers. There are not so many about carbon nanotubes. For the parents in the room, I have some good news and some bad news. The bad news is, you may partially be right. The skills that the students in this room are learning, maybe there are not the jobs out for them right now. But here is the good news. By the time they go through their training and have all those skills and are ready to go into the workplace, I believe that the jobs will be there. And here is the reason for my belief. The outbreak of PSA on kiwi fruit is not the first problem that we have faced as a country. And it is certainly not going to be the last. We are living in an increasingly complex, global, fast-paced, changing world. And the challenges that are facing our country are only going to escalate over the coming decades. But the finalists who are sitting in this room have exactly the set of skills who will be able to address and solve many of those problems. Perhaps more importantly, they have the skills to bring the country along with them as they do so. And of course, it's these traits that the finalists are going to have to prove to the judges in their speeches. So I wish all of you the very best for your talks tomorrow, and thank you for listening to me tonight.